Hello and welcome to episode number 42 of the Hafey Digital Podcast, a show for creators, makers, and doers, where my goal is to help you make to the max. My name is Ryan Hafey, and in this episode, we're going back to the basics of podcasting. Podcasting 101, how do you get started and what do you need to get started? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the show, everyone, and I just realized once again that I think my intro was doubled up because I forgot to turn off desktop audio in OBS, but that's okay. See, I've been using OBS for a different project occasionally on Saturdays, and as part of that, I turn desktop audio on within OBS. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. We're going to pull OBS over here, and what am I doing? There we go. Nope. Well, you're going to have to deal with the big mirror in mirror effect. But right here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's desktop audio, and typically all of that is controlled by the soundboard, my soundboard. But for certain things, like if I'm recording desktop audio, I need to turn that on. Otherwise, it needs to stay off because I get that doubling up. Anyway, if it sounded funny in the intro, that's why, but it's all good. Okay, let's see. For starters, if you're here with me right now, feel free to hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening, and follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter. Let's have a conversation when this is all said and done. Beverage for this week, we have good old trusty dusty Spindrift grapefruit. It's a nice, light, refreshing drink for a nice, relaxing Sunday, late morning, early afternoon, I guess you could say. So we are drinking that today. All right. The sound of the week, let's talk about that real quick before we get into one interesting update that I want to talk about. Sound of the week this week. Sound of the week last week was... And that was the sound of opening up one of those collapsible like green screens or reflectors. The sound of the week this week is not that. That was my dog, but this. All right. So if you think you know what that sound is, leave a comment anywhere you're listening and we'll reveal that at the end of the episode. Moving on, I got one interesting thing to talk about before we get into the main topic of the day, and that is last week. If you watched, you noticed that I basically broke down Joe Rogan's new podcast set. It's not very good, or at least it wasn't. The lighting was all bad. In fact, I'll show you a picture here. So this is just a screen grab of from one of his videos on YouTube. So the resolution and everything is not very good. This was, and just to kind of review some of the critiques that I had here was, for one, you can just look and see at these accent lights in the back and everything they're all really overexposed and really distracting. You have these LED light panels going on in the back that are really pointless because they're adding a lot of backlighting when you don't really need it. What you really need is more, better lighting on the subjects, and you need to turn those accent lights down. And besides, all this red that's in here, it's making their skin tones super red. It's just not a flattering look. So I spent all of last week's podcast talking about these things and really going into detail about what's so bad about it and what he could do to change it. And so as I just mentioned, there were some tweaks that I suggested. But now let's cut to one of his more recent episodes with, I forget the guy's name, Lex Friedman or something. And this is where we are at now. Now, this looks a little bit dark, I will say, and I think it may have to do with just, it being, again, a screenshot from YouTube. But if you look through this, you can see that a lot, not all, but a lot of the things that I mentioned, the things that I suggested they do to make the studio look better, they did. For starters, you can see that those big, bright LED light panels in the background are no longer turned on. Also, the accent lighting in the back and on the sides has been changed. It looks like they got rid of that orange color, which is probably good because, orange is not going to contrast with skin tones very well. It's going to take attention away from skin tones. So to have these super bright orange lights just was kind of counterintuitive. So they brought those lights down. It looks like they made them more of a daylight color. And you can also see that the subjects, they're still a little bit dark in my opinion. And I think there's a lot that could be done to make them a little bit, to make them lit up a little bit better. For example, maybe having the lights cross in to give some nice, I don't know. Right now, you can kind of see based on the shadow on Joe Rogan's head that his main light source appears to be kind of to his right as he's facing his guest and a little bit behind him. And that's not the most flattering place for a light. So you would think that you would want to get one light. You would want to get Joe Rogan's light kind of to the left of the guest, shining on him, and then the guest's light to the right of Joe Rogan, shining in their direction, if that makes sense. But I digress. Either way, this is definitely an improvement over what it used to be. So, I'm not going to take credit for those changes. I don't know for a fact whether or not Mr. Rogan or anyone on his team viewed my podcast video. But it's based on the results here. It's quite possible. So I'm not going to rule that out. I just don't have any proof that that's what happened. Either way, it's good to see that they are making some strides there. All right, so that was the main update from this week. Excited to see that. Very cool. But let's talk about podcasting. First, let's have a sip of our sparkling Spindrift here. Okay, so podcasting 101. Let's get back to some of the basics here. And I've talked about podcasting a lot on this podcast. And that's something that I'm really interested in lately, which is why it's so easy for me to talk about. And also, I've started to get a lot of inquiries from people, just friends and colleagues, or people who have watched my podcast setup series on my main YouTube channel, which I suppose I should link in the YouTube description and audio description of this video. I will do that, so check that out if you want to see it. But I'm getting a lot of people that are reaching out and asking for my advice on how to set up a podcast studio. And I've also helped a couple of people set up and produce podcasts in the recent past. So I think podcasting, especially with the pandemic and everything that's going on, is a very popular form of content. It's something that everyone can do remotely, and there's different ways to consume it. And that's a good segue into, let's talk about that. The different ways that are kind of the most popular ways to consume a podcast. Number one being just audio. You just an audio form. You're not interested in doing anything beyond that. You're just recording your podcast in audio form, uploading it to the internet. Boom, there you go. Then there's video and audio. So it includes both components. So that would be like you sitting in front of a camera, recording your podcast on video, uploading that video to, say, a video sharing service like YouTube, or and then also uploading the audio to a podcast host like Anchor, which is what I use. And then the third form incorporates live streaming. So you have all the components of audio, all the components of video, but then you're adding a live component, and that's what you're seeing right now, a combination of kind of all three of those things. So what I want to do is we're going to go back. We're going to start with audio, and we'll talk about the different types of equipment you need, different types of software. And keep in mind, this is going to be more of an eagle eye view of this. I'm not going to get super granular. Again, you can go back and check my series on my main channel for some more specifics about how to go about setting everything up. This is just more or less, if you're interested in starting a podcast, this is to let you know what you can expect as far as what you'll need to get, what kind of equipment you'll need to acquire and software you'll need to download in order to get things going. So let's start with audio. First things first, obviously, if you're only doing an audio podcast, this is definitely the cheapest way to do a podcast. And that is because you could literally, if you wanted to, start out with just your iPhone or smartphone, whatever it may be. And modern day smartphones are going to have sound recorders on them, and the audio quality that you get from recording into your phone is actually not that bad. You could even go out and purchase, you know, a little clip-in microphone that attaches to your phone. You get a little lavalier mic if you really wanted to, but for the most part, the audio is not bad. And then if you also use some kind of audio editing software, you can tweak it to make it sound just that much better before you upload it. But yeah, if you want to go the super inexpensive route, you could start with a smartphone. From there, you know, if you want to upgrade a little bit, you could do like a USB microphone that can be plugged directly into your laptop or PC or Mac or whatever. And then you could also go the XLR route and get something that's kind of like this, like a condenser microphone. I wouldn't typically recommend a dynamic mic, kind of like what you would imagine like a singer of a band holding. This is something more that's going to give you kind of more of that broadcast quality sound that you may be looking for out of a podcast. But if you wanted to go with something like this, then you would have to get a microphone and then some sort of audio interface. Again, I've featured, and you can't really see it there, this Rodecaster Pro. It's not something that you need. You don't need something this crazy, because this is an expensive audio board. It's about $600. But I do recommend this board highly and have recommended it in past videos. I recommend this if you're doing a podcast with more than one person, because this thing is like built for this purpose. Plus, again, you've got all of these different sound effects that you can incorporate and things like that. So very cool board, but you don't need it. That's basically what I'm getting at. So yeah, I mean, as long as you have a microphone, some way to record it, and then, you know, if you want to do some post-processing of your audio, you may want to get like a free audio processing software like Audacity, Audacity. It's free. It's very full-featured, and is definitely more than enough if all you need to do is just kind of tweak some of your audio as you go. Hold on here. There we go. I wanted to make sure. Okay, good. Sorry, sidebar. My Facebook live stream looked like it was frozen for a minute, but it was not. Just had to double check. Okay, back to business. So yeah, so if you're just doing audio, again, a microphone, a way to record it, and then some simple software to edit it and process it and chop off the parts you don't need. And then as far as hosting for your audio podcast goes, I've suggested it before, but that's Anchor, ANCHOR.FM. It's a free hosting platform. Their business model is more around earning a portion of any ad revenue that you generate through their ad placement products or services within their platform. But if you don't use those otherwise, it's free to host a certain amount of storage per month there. You also have others like Libsyn, which I've also used, but again, that's going to have a monthly fee associated with it. So yeah, just try Anchor. I like Anchor. It's super easy to use. There you go. All right. So now if you're getting into video, this is when things start to get a lot more complex. Maybe not a lot more complex. I guess it depends on how much, you feel like you know about the subject. But so when you're incorporating video, your audio, or at least your audio setup as far as like your microphone and everything might change a little bit. You won't want to use your phone audio anymore. If you're going to be doing some kind of video podcast, you obviously want to make sure that your video quality is going to be good, but also that your audio quality is going to match the quality of your video, and the assumption is that you want high quality video. So you're going to need a microphone, and there's a couple different options that I would suggest. Number one being a Lav Mic. If you want to have the freedom to kind of move around a little bit without having a big microphone in frame, like I actually kind of like how this looks with this setting, so I like it here. But some people like to hide the microphone, and there's two ways you can do that. One would be with like a lavalier mic, and you could record that either directly into camera or record it separately, and then kind of mix it with, sync it up with your video later on. Or you could get some kind of shotgun microphone that maybe sits just outside of frame. Shotgun microphone. There's a bunch of different kinds. These are two different options here. So this one here is the Rode Video Mic Pro, I believe. And this one is designed to plug directly into your camera. So it's got a little adapter there, so you could plug this into your camera. And then this is an XLR version of a shotgun microphone. This would plug into an audio interface or an external audio recorder in most cases. It all kind of depends on the sound that you're going for and the look you're going for. I think the best audio you're going to get is going to be out of something like this, typically. And I mean, if you're hosting a podcast as well, that's kind of commonplace for podcasts, is to have that microphone, to have that sort of broadcast quality audio, or at least that's the direction I feel like it's moving in, podcasting in general. So yeah, I would, if I had to make my suggestion, and if budget wasn't much of an issue, I'd say get yourself a condenser microphone, get yourself a small interface, just like if you were doing audio only. And then separate from that, you're obviously going to need a camera. And when it comes to cameras, you have to make a couple judgment calls. Number one, are you just going to do a single cam like this? Or are you going to maybe incorporate a couple different cameras so that when you're editing your video podcast together after the fact, you can melt everything, or, you know, kind of blend everything together to have different cuts and things and make it a little bit more interesting as you're moving along. Now, if you're recording directly into the cameras, something to keep in mind is that most DSLR and mirrorless cameras like this, so you can't see that at all, but so this is a Sony a6500 that I'm filming on currently. And most cameras like this are going to have a 30-minute recording limit. It has something to do with, like, I forget what it is, but it's some sort of like tariff or taxing thing. If it's not classified as a camcorder, it's taxed differently, so they had to limit it. I don't know. Don't take my word for that. But yeah, if you want something that's going to be able to record for a little bit longer, you might want to get an actual camcorder. I don't have a whole lot of experience with a camcorder, honestly, but that's something to consider. But if your podcasts typically are less than 30 minutes, then by all means charge up your batteries, hit record on your camera or cameras, let it ride until you're done, and then that's it. You don't have anything else to worry about. The other option would be recording a little bit, stopping, recording another segment, stopping. It's up to you. Let's see. Also, when it comes to video, you want to consider lighting. Again, I've got this big soft box here that shoots a nice soft light over me that casts some soft shadows, and it's nothing too harsh, no harsh shadows and things like that. I really like this particular setup. You don't need something like this. You can use natural lighting. You just have to be mindful that, if the clouds coming over and things like that will affect how your lighting looks. Also, for like the LED light panels, kind of like in Joe Rogan's podcast setup, those tend to not diffuse light as nicely, so you're not going to get as soft of a fall off in the shadows. But and also, when this is a good placement too for your lighting, is to kind of have it up, shining down on you, and a little bit off to the side, anywhere from 35 to 40 degrees off to the side. It's going to give you that kind of nice shadow on the one side of the face. It's just a nice contrast. Lighting, we got to talk to cameras, and of course, the assumption with all this is that this is going to include all the accessories. We're not going to go through, and you need to make sure you get a tripod, and you got to get a mic stand, you got to get the cables. Again, we're talking eagle eye view here. There's a lot of other different components that you need, but we just don't have time to discuss them in this episode exclusively. But yes, you're going to need to get things like the tripods, the cables. I have an external monitor so I can preview myself as I'm talking. If you've got a camera with a flip out screen, you may not need that. So really it's all going to depend on your particular setup. When it comes to just cameras in general, I'm personally partial to Sony cameras. I just like their video capabilities. I like that they have a clean HDMI out, which will come in handy if you want to do video, if you want to do live streaming, which we'll get into next. So yeah, consider a Canon or a Sony camera if you're interested in it. But what I would consider, especially with cameras, is looking for a camera that has a clean HDMI out. And what that means is that the display that you see on the feed that you see on the back of the camera when you turn it on, you can send that feed out with none of the little overlays out to your computer, so that you can just get a clean feed of whatever's coming out of your camera. And that's going to allow you to bring that feed into your computer so you can live stream it. If you don't have that clean HDMI output, then there's really not going to be any way for you to take the feed coming from your camera and get it into your computer, unless you're using like a super cheap webcam or something like that that plugs in via USB. But in most cases, that's not going to give you the audio quality that you want. So my suggestion, again, I always assume quality is your goal, or at least one of your goals. So if quality is going to be one of your goals, you got to stay away from the webcams. All right. Next up, and you know, you can, oh, I didn't mention software. Software when it comes to video, there's, you know, in most cases with podcast videos, you're not going to need to get super crazy with the transitions and things like that. A lot of times you can just do hard cuts, in which case, you know, free editing software like iMovie is gonna work just fine for you. I use the Adobe Creative Suite, so I'm using Premiere Pro when I edit the video. I use Audition when I'm editing the audio. You can export audio directly from Premiere, I believe, as you know, in your typical formats. So that would take away one of the different programs that you need to use. But yeah, find yourself editing software that you're going to be happy with, that you can use easily, and something that's not too complex, because you know, it's a podcast, it's a video, it's not meant to be super flashy and crazy transitions and all that, and it's unneeded. It's overkill. So now, the third way that podcasts are typically consumed is by combining audio, video, and streaming all into one. So if you're now getting into streaming, again, that's the format that you're watching right now. This podcast is live streamed to YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, aka Twitter, Twitch, and I think that's it. And then this video, when it's done, will be saved to YouTube, where it will just kind of live as a video that people can go back and watch. And then after this is done, I will take the audio from the video and process that and upload to Anchor, so that I have the podcast in audio only format. So if you want to get into streaming, again, as I mentioned, on the hardware side, you're going to have the same general type of equipment that you would need if you were doing an audio and video podcast without streaming. Obviously, you want to get a camera that's got the clean HDMI out so that you can get that feed into your computer. But in order to get the feed from the camera to the computer, you need what's called a capture card, or you could also get yourself something like this, which is the ATEM mini switcher board. And the beauty of this, as you're kind of seeing right now, is that I can plug in multiple cameras into this board, and there's nothing in that input, which is why it's black. But I can plug multiple camera angles into this board and switch back and forth through them seamlessly with the push of a button. And this will all get baked into the final recording of this particular episode. But this switcher board is what's going to convert the feed so that your computer can ingest it. If, let's say, you're only doing a single camera operation and you don't need multiple cameras, something like this may be a little bit of overkill, in which case you can just get yourself a capture card. Elgato Camlink 4K is a good capture card. I know that, or at least I've heard that a lot of capture cards and even like this ATEM board are hard to find right now, just because, again, everyone's investing in podcasting. But if you can find one, you know, then I guess you're good to go. I don't really know what else to say to that. Look on eBay. I'm sure there's people, you know, if you can't find it on B&H or Amazon, I'm sure people are selling them on eBay, maybe for a little bit inflated prices, but who knows. But yeah, so these things are going to allow you to get your signal from your camera into your computer. And then from there, you can use software like OBS, which I showed you earlier. But this is the software that I use. Again, you're going to have to deal with the mirror. But this is OBS, and OBS is what I use personally for streaming and for recording. And again, I've got a whole tutorial that goes through all the settings that I use within OBS to live stream and record my podcast. So I will link to that below. Make sure you go check that out if you want the specifics. But yeah, get OBS. It's free. It stands for Open Broadcaster Software. And all of the streaming and recording I do goes through that software. Another thing you can consider if you are doing a live stream podcast is this little guy in it here. We got to change the focus. This is the Elgato Stream Deck, and they make a couple different sizes of these. This one has 15 buttons on it. Let's see if I'm getting my focus right. I hope so. And the beauty of this thing is that, and this isn't just specific to podcasting. You can use this for all sorts of things, but you can assign commands to those different buttons, including commands in OBS. So you can do scene switching and source switching in OBS directly from this board. So for example, when I do my little subscribe animation, it's the press of a button for me because I've just tied that into a scene or a source that I've added to OBS. Press a button, it activates it, and we're off to the races. Just a cool little handy thing so that you don't have to be taking your mouse and clicking within OBS. You can just do things with the push of a button. Software. So you'll still likely need, an audio editing software of some kind, whether it be Audacity or whether it be Adobe Audition, something that you can go in and maybe touch up the audio a little bit and delete maybe any dead space at the beginning and end. You may also want some video editing software. If you take your full podcast episodes and you like to clip them out into smaller bite-sized pieces that you upload as separate pieces of content, you'll want something that can easily allow you to do that. Also, again, as mentioned, OBS is the other big software that you're going to want to need. Websites that I would suggest for live streaming, again, if you want to kind of expand your streaming reach a little bit and stream to multiple platforms at once. The one that I use that allows me to stream to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch all at once is called Restream. It's restream.io. And in fact, I can show you here. This is my YouTube dashboard, but this is Restream. So you can see I've got all the different properties that I'm streaming to here on the left. This is my feed here on the right. You even get some details about what your frame rate is, your resolution, what your bit rate is, all this type of stuff. And it just does it literally with one click. As soon as you start your live stream within Restream, basically once you hit start streaming in OBS, it sends it out to Restream and it's sent everywhere. And it couldn't be simpler. You just got to take some time to kind of figure out the setup of Restream. But other than that, you're off to the races. What else? Got switcher, capture card. One thing to remember too with it when it comes to using a capture card versus, again, a switcher board, something like this. You only need one. You need one capture card per camera angle. So again, if you're a one angle podcast, then it's perfect because you just need one capture card into the computer. You go. If you want to add on extra camera angles, then you need to get additional capture cards as well that will get that feed into your computer. But price wise, I mean, this ATEM mini switcher board I think is only $300 or $400. I forget off the top of my head. And those capture cards in most cases are usually around 150, 130, 150 bucks. Again, depends on the brand. So what that means is that, if you go beyond 2 camera angles, if you've got a setup like this where I've got 3 camera angles, at that point, I would typically need 3 capture cards, or which would be around 450 bucks, or I can save a little bit of money, get this board here for around 400 bucks and still have enough room if I want for, up to 4 camera angles to be put in, live switching, all that kind of stuff. You can even do picture in picture if you really wanted to, although it doesn't make much sense in this particular context. But there you go. I love this little board. They even have a Pro Plus, which has some additional features that I haven't really played with much, but yeah, I highly recommend it. So there you go. Audio, video, and streaming are your three different forms of audio. And what I typically suggest for people, I've had people approach me and say, I want to start a podcast and I want to just go all in right now. What I try to tell those people is to start small. It's one of two things. It's either you start small, like if you want to get started now, let's get you up and running in audio form only. That way you can kind of figure out, really dial in the format that you want for the show. And you can just take things step by step, because again, once you start incorporating video, and then especially with live streaming, what I typically do, what I do with my live streams, I produce, I'm a one-man show. I produce everything. So everything that you're seeing that's happening is I'm doing solo, and it's a big undertaking, and it's not something that kind of the average person could take up, could pick up within a week and be up and running. There's a lot of moving parts to it. So what I would say is start slow, get the audio version going. You could even be recording video initially and maybe holding off on that. But I would say get your format in, get some episodes under your belt, and then start building off of that and say, okay, now, you know what, maybe it's a good time now that we're 20 episodes in, let's start a YouTube channel and start getting these up in video form. Great. Okay, we've been doing this for a while. I think we feel like we're very comfortable with where we are with video. Let's start some live streams. Let's get some, people engaged on live stream. Now you can incrementally, again, build to that next step. And hopefully some of the things we've gone through today will give you just some starting points. Hopefully you understand better now what's going to be kind of needed at each different step. The more steps the higher up you go in the ladder, the more complex it gets. But, guess it just comes down to whatever your goals happen to be for your podcast. But anyway, I think it's about all I got for today. I hope that was helpful. So, but if you're still with me here, be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening, and follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter, so we can have a conversation after this episode is done with. I do thank you for being here today. I appreciate you, and I'm going to call this one done. So until next time, keep on creating, making, and doing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.